Welcome to the Recover You podcast with Kylene and Patrick Terhune. It's here that we talk about sex addiction, betrayal trauma, mental, emotional, and physical health, faith, and anything and everything needed to recover you to your most authentic self that God created you to be. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you.
Sing the whole song.
Happy birthday
Yes,
to
you are.
Patrick. Happy birthday to you.
To me.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Today is my 18th birthday.
Yes, I posted a picture on Instagram today. Nothing makes a 52-year-old man happier than getting some new Lego.
You know, it's funny you say that because it's like, it's one of those things that sometimes you go, man, am I too old to be getting Lego? But here's
Never.
Like, here's the thing, like, it brings me joy.
Yeah.
So why not? You know what I mean? Like, if it brings me joy.
I think like we're going to talk about the opposite of addiction is what today, the opposite, we're going to talk about community. And to me, I go, that's like a reclaiming of innocence, right? Like,
right.
It's this thing that you really enjoy, that you really love. And
it's something that gives me really fond memories from childhood.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are a lot of fun memories with me and my brothers and my father and all these different things. So.
Well, I think recovery from anything really, trauma, betrayal, addiction, all of it. There's a big part of it that involves reparenting and reloving that inner child part of you that was hurt at some point.
Yeah.
And I think things like that play a role. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not that you're consciously like, oh, let me work on my inner child and do some Lego, but that's sort of just like a subconscious, like I am nurturing myself. I'm playing into that part that is innocent and, I'm supporting it and loving it and
what's interesting,
healing it.
Yeah. What's interesting, this is my third birthday since discovery, right? So in the recovery journey, and it's really caused me to reflect quite a bit. And so you and I were talking about this a little bit last night. Like, I'm finding that I have been able, you talk about reparenting, right? What does a parent do? In general, for the most part, a parent loves their children unconditionally, right? And so what I'm finding is it wasn't this way maybe a year ago or at my 51st birthday, but, looking back on this quote unquote journey that I've taken and looking at my 5-year journal, because I think it goes 48, 49. Is that right? Yeah. 48, 49, 50, 51. And seeing the comments that I made in addiction and then in recovery. And, I think I told you I'm developing a little bit more sympathy towards the addict side of me and what I was trying to do and the anguish I was in. And then being here almost 3 years later and seeing how worth it this journey is and how much you grow if you really, buckle down and do the work and open up and allow hard things to happen and you know what I mean? And things like that as you go through this. So it's been an interesting thing, but yeah, it's like, you got to celebrate, right? You have to celebrate because it's not an easy path. And people have come around me, you've come around me, come alongside me in your deepest hurt, and Keegan has done the same. And West Point classmates have, and family has, and all of these different things. And they've come alongside of me and, and celebrated and encouraged, that journey to kind of go that route. And so I don't know if I inadvertently caused a great segue.
Oh yeah, that's perfect segue. Yeah. What do all of those things mean for your recovery? They are
a community. Yeah, right. So yeah, it's just it's a really interesting thing to be able to benchmark recovery on your birthday and see where that leads to and what it's done individually, what it's done in our relationship, and what it's done in broader relationships from there.
Well, there's recovery for you and there's recovery for me, right? And birthdays and holidays are benchmarks, I think, for both of us, right? Like, I am not somebody that's going to fake things publicly, right? And so there was about a year and a half where while we were really going through the deepest parts of survival and stability and all this kind of stuff, creating like, okay, is he going to actually get into recovery, and what does this look like? And where I was like deep in the throes of depression and anxiety and figuring out my life, where like I didn't post any pictures of us on social media. I went from praising you very effusively in all of my posts to not talking about you on social media, like all this kind of stuff, right? And so like these benchmarks, it's so interesting because we're in such a good place right now, and so many things have happened. And we talked about this several episodes ago, like while there was a lot of stuff that happened during the summer that was really hard, 2023 in general has just been progressive growth, continued growth for us. And so on your birthday, about a year and a half into recovery, I started posting pictures of you again. And for your birthday, I think this is the third birthday, and I think it's the only one I've actually publicly said happy birthday to you.
Yeah. And that's okay.
Like it's not that we didn't, it's not that I was being mean to you on your birthday before or anything like that, but it's just, it's different, right? And I'm not going to like sugarcoat something publicly, or I don't know.
I think what hopefully I've been able to do is provide tremendous safety for you to feel more comfortable with posting some things. And posting is not the be all of your relationship.
The other thing with that is like social media is such an interesting thing. There are so many times I know people might look at me and go, oh, she has so much confidence. Oh, she's like, she's posting her whole life out here. And people can have all the thoughts and opinions that they want about that. The reality is that a lot of times, if my primary source of clients didn't come from social media, there's so many times where it's like, I would be off of it. You know what I mean? And it's like, there's this idea that people that post publicly, I don't know how to explain it, that just like, we don't get our feelings hurt. Right. And the reality is I was talking to you about this, I think yesterday, there's a sense to which I feel called to talk about these difficult things. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I like that. You know what I mean? I feel called to help people. The primary way that I have found doable for me is through social media channels. Most people that come and work with me end up finding me on TikTok and resonating with my story, right? But that doesn't mean that it's easy to share these things publicly. Like it's a very vulnerable, like putting yourself out there and saying things that I know are going to cause conflict in people, that people are going to disagree with, right? About how we view pornography, about how we view marriage. Like I just posted some videos on TikTok about sex within Christian marriage and kind of going against some of the what we believe are like toxic beliefs in the church and everything. I think we're going to do an episode on that. But people get real riled up about that. And anyway, my point is, because this is going on a tangent already, but my point is, it's easy for people to go, oh, well, she likes being public, or she likes, everything. And everything that I do publicly is, I try very hard to think it through, right? Like it's very intentional. And so that goes into like, when I do post and I say happy birthday, or I love you, or, something, it's very sincere. It's very sincere. Yeah. And so this has been such a journey for us to go through the pain. And we were not public through the pain. We were like, we were not going to talk openly about our story until we knew that we had some solid footing, right? And that we could that we were far enough ahead in our journey and stable enough in our journey that we could actually pull others up and start helping them, right? And so it's just really interesting now, because we've been doing this for about a year and a half, or a little over, coming into a year and a half, because it was like June. So wow. I know. Isn't that crazy? Yeah. And so so all these benchmarks of like time, and the fact that we've started the podcast, and the comments that we've gotten from the podcast. And then we had a photo shoot the other day that was really special because it was special because after everything happened, like we kind of decided fairly mutually. It was more on my end, but fairly mutually. It was to go before discovery and after discovery with our relationship and think this is a different relationship. And so we don't have a lot of photos up from what I call our past relationship, right? And so to be in a place where it goes, okay, no, I want to have new photos and I want them to be, romantic and, we can put these up in the house and it looks like, so anyway, yes. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
A long intro to a totally different topic, but it's just the growth and the change in where we've come it's just been so much. Yeah. And
absolutely.
And we're in a good place and I like it. So I hope you're having a happy birthday. And I can't believe we're recording a podcast on your birthday, but we're so behind. Like,
No, we're not.
Yeah.
This is still going to come out on a Wednesday.
I know. We batched our so many episodes, and then he was out of town for his 30th West Point reunion,
right? And
then I was out of town for a conference, and so now here we are recording again.
That's right,
on your birthday. So that being said, today we're talking about community. So let's kind of introduce it with the idea that, and you've heard us mention this before, but it's very accepted among professionals in the trauma and addiction communities, kind of across the board. You'll hear this statement a lot from a lot of different people that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it is connection, or it is community. Those two ideas kind of simultaneously play into each other. So why don't we talk about, and I would say a lot of times it's the opposite of addiction, but I am going to say for the purpose of this podcast, recovery requires community, right? Because on the betrayal side as well, community is very important, and we're going to talk about that. But the statement that you'll hear a lot is the opposite of addiction is.
Right.
And so just kind of go into what do you think that means and why?
Yeah. So I think one of the other companion statements that goes along with that is we get wounded in community and we get healed in community. Right. So very rarely.
That's a great way to say it, because then it applies to both. We get healed in community.
Right. So very rarely do we just get emotionally wounded on our own. Right. It never happens that way. It's always a relational thing. It's something that happens.
You're talking about I'm living in a bubble. I don't interact with anybody and nobody ever hurts my feelings.
Yeah. So, we develop coping mechanisms to deal with the interactions of life.
Yeah.
And in healthy people, they develop healthy ways to do that. And they use, friendships and vulnerability and safe, people in their life to do it. Unhealthy people develop addictions, certain coping mechanisms and things like that they have to kind of work through. But that's, we all have the potential to be wounded by community.
I just want to clarify just the way you said that they're unhealthy people develop coping mechanisms. I would reframe that and say, I would say wounded people, because it's not that you are an unhealthy person. It's that you're a hurt person who develops an unhealthy coping mechanism.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so, I think that's important, because we all start out in life as these innocent little beings, right? That go out and so many of us get hurt because in childhood, we go, I'm going to just show up as my authentic self, right? Like that's like what kids do. And then because of parent relationships or trauma that's transferred generationally, or patterns within families, or woundings from friends or whatever, right? Different things that happen in life, we get hurt. And then out of that, so I just think that's an important distinction.
Yeah. And so if you think about it, the most effective ways to heal people from certain things is they will get you into therapy, right? And, you don't go into a therapy session with nobody, just yourself and reading a book, right? You're actually in there with a person. So that's a sense of community. And they always recommend you move into some sort of group program. And so what group does for you is it allows you to be open and honest and vulnerable. It allows you to, and we're all human beings. So we do this, we compare, right? We go, maybe I'm not as addicted as that person, or wow, that person's really in good shape. I'd like to get to where that person is, right? So you develop these mechanisms, and over time, and then the whole notion of boundaries, right? Boundaries is actually a community forming thing. communities have to have boundaries in order for them to function correctly. Communities, if you think about a city, if a city had no boundaries, right? No lines on the street, no times when you could just commit crimes with no consequence, right? These are all boundaries that happen. And so you have to, boundaries are there for people's safety and to keep things healthy. So that's what healthy communities do, is they work with each other. And think of the worst family interactions you've ever had, and think of the best ones you've had, right? Usually they're marked by a level of safety and comfort. And then the ones that were unhealthy, let's say unhealthy relationships, it was a lack of boundaries, lack of mutual understanding of a particular issue.
So one of the things that you mentioned with that was this idea of safety and finding that within community. And so I want to pull that specific point out, because when you're talking about, I think this applies to everybody, but when you're talking about a betrayed partner, when you know that 70 to 80% of them experience PTSD symptoms, and you're looking at, when I'm working with women and when you work with a CSAT or when you work with a trauma specialist or whoever you're working with to recover from betrayal, which is a trauma to the system, the first phase that we are always working through and that I'm helping clients through is safety. Like if you don't have a sense of safety and stability, then you can't recover. And a lot of times what we end up doing is seeking that safety from other people, right? And so there's a lot of layers to this. And one of the things that I often say is when you are working towards recovery with a partner who has betrayed you, in the beginning, you're not 100% sure where this is going to end up, right? And so you're kind of, you can establish safety in your environment and in your relationship with their participation, which is optimal if you're working towards recovery, or you can establish safety through your own behaviors and your own boundaries. Again, optimally, those are going to be respected and participated in, and that's going to it's going to be easier to have a firm foundation that way, right? But you can also do that yourself. But really, I think, when we're talking about community and we're talking about recovery and we're talking about healing really, like you mentioned earlier, really does come through other people. It's very difficult to heal from painful situations or from betrayal or from trauma all by yourself. So again, taking your spouse out of it, regardless of whether they are, in active recovery or not, having people in your life that are supportive and are going to provide a level of safety and stability for you in some way is very important, because we can find that. Let me phrase it this way. You can have people in your life that know. There's different versions of it. You can have people in your life that know exactly what you're going through, and that's going to be a community, like a support group that understands they've experienced the same thing and they can relate and validate, right? But there's also, it doesn't always have to come from people that are going through the exact same thing. Sometimes it's important to even intentionally have both, because when there's the support groups are helpful because it's like there really is nothing like someone who can truly say, yeah, I've gone through something similar and I deeply understand the pain that you're feeling. Because a lot of times when people haven't gone through it, they actually don't really quite understand what that trauma is like. They really just don't know how it changes your brain and how it changes your perspective of the world and how unsafe it makes you feel, right? And so there's so much validity to that. And there's so much purpose to groups and community and friendships and everything, connection outside of that, because as you go through recovery, it's going to be really important for you to connect with people that are able to empathize with you and validate what you're experiencing without understanding it. That provides a lot for you to feel loved when somebody doesn't, they're like, I don't get it. I can't even imagine what you're feeling, but please tell me about it, or like, I'm here to hold space for you and to support you and to love you, even though I don't know how that feels.
That sounds really difficult,
Yeah, that sounds really hard. Tell me more about that. How can I be here for you? Right. Yeah. And the same, and talking about those people, having those people that can provide empathy, but then also knowing they're not in the same experience as you. And so sometimes being around people that remind you that it's okay to like keep living your life.
Right.
And that kind of like get you outside of the trauma and betrayal spiral. Because I have found that is very easy to get into because it is very overwhelming. It is very scary. And so having both, I think, is really important, actually.
Yeah. And I can speak to my own experience. So I've got these groups that I run and these people that have been in, and one of the things that we do, and I do this intentionally, so we always do a check-in at the beginning, and I'm the group leader, right? So a lot of times I'm always the last one to check in. And this is, and I remember one of the gentlemen in the group did this to me. It was a particularly long group check-in, right? And I was kind of getting anxious about starting the video. And we got to it. I said, okay, guys, thanks. We're going to go ahead and start the video now. And one guy goes, hey, hold on a second. How was your week? And so he wasn't the group leader, right? And so it was a safe enough environment in the group for him to reach out and say, hey, how was your week? And that's really important because sometimes leaders, and they talk about pastors and things like that, get isolated, right? They can't talk about how difficult things they're struggling with, especially pastors, right? So that group in and of itself, we all understand each other's story. I can share a part of my addiction that nobody's going to be shocked by. Right. You know what I mean? Nobody's going to be like, recovery. They're going to go, oh yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, I get your wife's mad at you. Yep, got it. You know what I mean? Been there, and stuff like that. So there is no surprise there. Yeah. So that's to your point, that's the group that everybody knows everything about everybody, right down to the deepest, darkest secrets. You know what I mean? The flip side is I have my West Point classmates, and there's a lot of them who are friends with you on Facebook and Instagram and friends with me and people I have told my story to and things like that. And these are folks that maybe didn't have the same path that I had with addiction and then recovery, but maybe had a similar path, maybe addiction with something else or pain, things like that. And
maybe they just don't relate at all.
They don't relate at all. But as I've talked to them and they've known the story, is they're like, and these, I'm going to actually quote them, Pat, we care deeply about you. We want you to be okay. Pat, we really, really love you. And you know what I mean? And
they've said, we really respect what you and your wife are doing. Like,
right. Yeah.
They say really positive, encouraging things about the process. Yeah. Even if they haven't experience the same thing, they go, wow, that must be really hard. They've expressed a lot of curiosity and interest in terms of like hearing your story and hearing your perspective on it and understanding what we've been through. Right. And then they've made incredibly supportive comments about what we've chosen to do, speaking about it out in the open and stuff like that.
Yeah. At my 30-year reunion this past weekend, I actually mentioned this to you. It's the first time I had gone to a West Point gathering of that magnitude, being in recovery. And I don't know, we've lost 21 out of 1,050 or whatever. And I have heard, I can't verify this, but I've heard that the majority of them have been through suicide. And so, what I noticed, and you and I talked about this, is I seem to receive, or I heard guys really telling other folks, hey, I really, really love you. And so part of me was like, is that just where we are in life and what's happened to us? We've all struggled with our own demons. Or was I not ready to receive that before? And I just, and it was said, but I was not, my whole being was not ready to receive it. So the healing work has allowed me to step into that community that already existed and start to gain the safety that, you could argue has always been there.
Right.
I just, because of my wounds, I was unable to receive in full.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, because I think, I don't know clinically if this is accurate or not, but I think the level to which we're able to receive love would greatly parallel the level to which we're able to accept and love ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think you have to, the journey is trying to find a way to love yourself.
Because we always have a filter that we look at life through, and that filter is typically based on our life experiences and often our woundings. And so if we're looking for proof that we're horrible people because we're going through something horrible, we're going to find that, and we're going to ignore all the positive comments. But if we are looking at life now through a lens of healing and recovery and compassion and love, then you're going to be much more able to notice when people say that to you and receive it as if it's true, right? If you don't believe that you're a good enough person to be loved and somebody says, I love you, that comment is probably not going to register.
It's not. Yeah. It's not, because you don't fundamentally to your core believe it. Right. And so it just sounds like words at that point. And so, and I've brought this up before, and this comes out of the Conqueror. This is not my saying, but it's like, you truly don't heal unless you become daily aware. And so, think about that. My lens was open, my ears were open during the reunion that 2 weekends ago, and I could receive those things, and maybe I've never been able to, or through that period.
Yeah, what you said in the first example of someone in your group kind of going, well, oh wait, but you as the leader, like, let's make sure that you're cared for as well. That's so important. It reminded me of this thing I posted on Instagram the other day, so I just pulled it up. It said, the healer also needs healing. The planner also needs surprises. The giver also needs to receive. The thoughtful also needs to be thought of. The considerate also needs to be considered.
Yeah.
Man, does that hit?
Yeah.
It's, I mean, I don't want to sit here and complain about doing what we're doing, because I love it. I absolutely love it. I find a lot of fulfillment in it. I love supporting my clients, and sometimes doing this work, because it is so deeply rooted in pain and emotion and all this kind of stuff. Sometimes it's hard. And, you and I are, as great as we're doing, still moving through our own lives and still moving through our own journey. Right. And so sometimes it's like, man, that, the healer still needs healing. Right. The coach still needs coaching, and so we stay very intentional about trying to, seek out those resources and stay in our own communities, because that is so important. We cannot do this alone. And I think anybody that is high in a leadership position, or high in a place where they're like helping other people or encouraging other people or speaking into other people in any way, whether it's a coach or a therapist or a pastor or anything, like, if they're not, they should be, but most of them probably are engaged in some sort of community, because you cannot do those
successful ones.
Right. Or mentally and emotionally healthy ones. I guess I would say that, right? Yeah. Because, man, it's just hard to do life alone.
Yeah.
You just can't.
I often think this came to mind, and I know we've talked about this before, but, Jesus, the night he was seized, he was in the garden, right? And he brought the disciples with him, and he was going off to pray, right? And what did he say to his disciples?
He wanted them to stay awake.
He wanted them to stay awake, right? And and they let him down, right? So community let him down, right? And so, but he knew, what he needed in that moment, and what was he knew what was coming. He knew what was the hardest thing that he was going to face, and he was communing with his Father, his heavenly Father. But he also needed the comfort and the companionship of earthly men, right?
Yeah.
And then he kept going, and then he knew he was going to be abandoned. But then it all came back, right? And so now he didn't. I guess, and I don't know. We'll all figure this out. Did he need to heal in community? I don't know. But the point is, he needed that community. He recognized that he needed that community.
Fully human. And if you go back to the beginning of time, as Christians, we believe what the Bible says, and how it's written is that, like, literally from the beginning, man was not made to be alone.
Right.
Man in the universal terminology of humankind, right? Like, we were not created to be alone. We were created to be in community. Yeah. And it's like literally from the first couple chapters of the Bible established very clearly that we are designed to be in community with each other. And there's, we're designed to be in community with God. Like, there's a specific community and connection there. And that's why I think so much of humanity, regardless of how, regardless of what people end up believing, there is a search for purpose and meaning and spirituality, because that's how we're created. Like, we know on some deep eternal level that we're supposed to be in connection with the thing that created us, right? But then also we have this deep need for connecting with other people. And so that's why groups and community and all this kind of stuff is so, so important. So I think from there, understanding the importance and the reality of just being human, right? Like, everyone needs friends and everyone needs, people that have the same hobbies and all this kind of stuff. But I would say, what are some things that we look for in a healthy community, and or what are some things that maybe we should kind of keep an eye out for, or that could be pitfalls within communities?
So I would say the ability to be honest and be kind, right? I think that's important. People who are going to maybe call you on your BS, but do it in a kind, loving way. You know what I mean? Sometimes people call you on your BS, and maybe it's not BS, or they're yelling at you and they're demeaning you and things like that. That's not very healthy. But you do need somebody to say, hey, I think you were a little harsh. You know what I mean? And think about sometimes in parental relationships, sometimes the other parent goes, hey, I think you're a little harsh on that. And that's healthy, right? Because you always want somebody who can check you. The second thing is this is what I would say, your willingness to share. If you feel more willing to share with that person or that community, that's pretty good. That's a sense that you've got a healthy community there. If you're holding back and you're saying, I'm not going to share this, that could either mean that you need to do some more healing, or the community itself is unhealthy. And so I think
so a sense of safety.
Yeah, sense of safety.
Expressing, I would say, a sense of safety in showing up authentically as yourself, whatever that means. So like, and that can be hard because I think finding communities or relationships where it's okay to share both the good and the bad, right? Because sometimes you might connect with somebody on one side of that and feel weird sharing the other side of that. But when, with real vulnerability and real connection and real community, it's accepting each other through all of those things. Yeah. Again, whether or not you're fully relating or in the same space or whatever, like, I'm in a great place, you're in a hard place, I express empathy to that, or I'm in a really hard place, you're in a really great place, and I feel safe sharing, that I'm struggling right now, right? Yeah. And
I would say, and you learn this going through recovery, is spaces where they're not trying to fix your problems either. So, like one of the most safe things you can do is after somebody, let's say, shares, you go, is it okay if I give you some advice? Versus just talking over the person or telling your story over their difficult situation. People do that all the time. They kind of turn it back on themselves.
Well, sometimes that's like their attempt at relating.
It can be.
Right? Let me share how maybe I've experienced something very similar, or how I can I'm trying to connect to the emotion that you're sharing, right? But I think what you're bringing up is like when somebody responds and goes, let me tell you my opinion, and putting that over you and saying how your response to this experience is wrong and mine was right. Right. That can be incredibly toxic. Yeah. And that is so hard. Right. When you are open and vulnerable to somebody and saying, okay, I'm going to share this scary part of my journey right now, and it's a hurtful part that I'm going through. And then somebody goes, usually not in these words, but maybe the interpretation ends up being like, well, you shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah.
That's hard. And that, to me, like that, and you're going to experience that through recovery in different ways. You're going to share little parts of your story, and it will become very clear very quickly who you feel is safe and not. And the response to your story is typically what tells you that. And so it's either empathetic and supportive and loving and maybe curious, right? Like, tell me more. Maybe I don't understand, but I'm going to hold space for you. Or let me share opinions. Let me share like their version of a solution, or let me tell you how you should feel, or just flat out being like, I don't understand why you feel that way, right? Yeah. All of those are going to be, oh, okay, I'm going to put a little check mark next to that maybe this is not a safe person to come to when I'm feeling vulnerable and to share the hard parts with.
Yeah, one of the most effective things you can ask somebody when they're sharing with you is, hey, how do you need me to show up right now? Are you looking for solutions, or you just want me to listen? And that's okay, because sometimes people are looking for solutions. And sometimes people they need to get it off their chest.
I would say like maybe in like an individual, like one-to-one, that's really good. Often if you're in like a group that is focused on a specific thing, it's going to be focused on that specific thing. So if it's like moving forward or growth or recovery, or like if you're sharing in that, then you're probably looking for, like the assumption would generally be made, hey, like if we're in this together, we're all moving forward together, versus if I'm sharing with somebody that maybe is not in addiction or trauma recovery, then their response is going to be like, okay, like, are you venting, or do you want to talk this through? Right. But if you're like peer to peer in a specific support group, for example, then it may be more understood that the outcome of sharing is a specific desire, right?
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But yeah, if it's like peer to peer, a lot of times, or one-on-one, it's a lot of times like, okay, well, are you, exactly what you said. Do you want to talk this through?
Mhm.
Do you want to just,
Right. Yeah, in running these groups, there are positive group behaviors and negative group behaviors, and so I watch for them. And when I'm leading the groups and people are checking in, are people offering too many opinions, or people being too graphic in their sharing,
graphic, yeah,
and things like that. And so there's
you have to protect everybody that's going through this.
Mhm.
You don't want, in a group situation, you don't want people to be triggered further.
That's right. Yeah. You want them to kind of view it as a safe place to come to.
Right.
You know what I mean, and things like that.
Yep.
So it's there's a lot of ways for people to show up in a healthy way.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say the deeper you get into recovery and healing, I would guess that you can shape the groups that you're in and use them for healing more effectively, versus when you just come in. Like I often tell that story, the first Conquer group I went into was very safe. It was two older gentlemen, and they did a great job standing next to me. And the next one I went into was,
you felt really overwhelmed.
I felt really overwhelmed and I almost left. But I think I had enough sense to know that was going to be part of my development too. You know what I mean?
You were like,
yeah,
I don't know how I feel about this. There was a lot more people. There was a lot more to kind of comments being made.
And stuff like that. So I wanted to get to a point where I could, I knew that was part of the development. And, really what it was, hey, everybody's in a different stage. People are in different, levels of maturity. People are having to learn. People are,
Well, and it's always a good reminder to, that a trigger is just a reflection of an unhealed wound.
Right.
And so whenever we're feeling triggered, it's beneficial to stop and go, okay, what is inside of me that's responding to this right now? What part of me is responding to this? Because sometimes the response means, okay, well, maybe that person is not, maybe that situation or that group or that person is not something or someone that I need to be involved in right now. Maybe that is the answer.
Yeah.
And then sometimes the answer is, okay, that actually just showed me that there's something that I still need to personally work on, because, this is something that, in a healthy state, maybe I should be able to handle, or it shouldn't bother me. Right. And so that just shows me that there's more for me to, take to my group or take to my counselor to, do some emotional processing on, or, whatever. Yeah.
Yep.
I do want to mention before we kind of wrap up is kind of what pitfalls we should watch out for too. And I think on the betrayal side, one of the things that I do see can be a problem is the finding your identity in the victim status.
Right.
And this is just a very broad stereotypical statement about the internet and social media and everything that's out there, right? And that is that there is a lot of people that have been hurt, and they are justified in their pain. 100%. And through that lens and through that filter, they make broad statements like all men are cheaters and no man can recover. And all, and so they have found an identity that empowers them in the pain. And sometimes when that happens, because it's so unhealthy, that then leads to putting other people down, right? As opposed to when you're fully committed to moving through the pain to get to a place of healing. And then you have a higher perspective that, yes, some people are in pain and some people aren't. And some people are, behave badly and some people don't. And some people behave badly and they can heal. And some people behave badly and sometimes, and then they stay bad, they stay in their addiction or whatever, And so, I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and just in culture in general, I think we over the past 10 years have come to a place where it's very difficult to have these conversations, right? And broad brushstrokes are made, and I think that is a reflection of a lot of wounding and a lot of pain and a lot of insecurity and a huge lack of safety in our relationships, lack of safety in our culture, lack of safety just in general. Right. And so from a place of fear and wounding, we can see people lash out and say mean things and make stereotypes and all these kinds of things. And so just noticing, right, if you are seeking a community, and there are betrayal communities that are online, support groups that are online, and there's so many resources that are great and awesome and focus on healing. And there are some where you'll see if someone posts a comment and there's just a lot of negativity, get out of the, like, right. And so, you and I, we try, and we're probably not perfect with this, but we try to kind of walk that line of, right, my goal is your health. So I can't tell you what the answer is. I don't know if it's to stay in your relationship, but we're going to point out how, if you are staying, what does healthy look like? Right. And if it's toxic, reminding you that you are allowed to leave. Right. And so kind of walking that line of like, okay, holding the standard of safety and of health, that's where you want to move towards. And we can't necessarily, I don't know you, I don't know your relationship, right? You may be choosing to stay, you may be choosing to leave. That's your choice. And that's okay. Right. But a lot of times people will be struggling and they'll post something online and you'll see people just absolutely like attack them in the comments. Like, they're trying to figure out, like, is this something I can work through? And just like 20 people will be like, you need to leave. There's no chance, And it's like, okay, your situation is different. It's every situation is different. There may be patterns, there may be commonalities, but, take every situation individually. Right. And always focus on health and healing and recovery.
There's a friend of mine who's, we've been through a recovery journey together, and he actually says it best when you hear someone speaking in absolutes, that means that there's a lot of unresolved healing or unresolved trauma there. Or, so like, here's a good example. I will never go to a beach with my husband again, or I will never, we will never go to, or I will never allow this person to do this again. Like, that's usually coming from a point of massive wounding, and it indicates something that you got to kind of figure out. And you and I have talked about this, like, what are safe activities to do as a couple, right? What are safe activities? And it's a broad brush, right? And so, like, I think you mentioned, like, all men are cheaters. Well, clearly not all men are cheaters, right?
I'm not saying that.
I know you didn't say that. You didn't say that. But what I'm saying is like if you find yourself, or you find the people you're in, they make, women don't heal from this. Well, that's not necessarily true. If you put a woman in a situation where they're not in a safe environment, it's going to make it more difficult to heal. Doesn't mean that they won't ever heal. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of, you hear people say these things, and it's usually a limbic reaction born out of a lot of trauma that still hasn't resolved. And I think
a lot of times there's something called a secondary gain. And that is when we are in a place that is stuck and we don't want to move forward. There's a reason for that. And a secondary gain basically means there's a benefit to staying stuck. And that sounds so counterintuitive. Well, why would I want to stay in a place that is not of ultimate health, right? And it's because you're gaining something from that place. And this comment that I'm making right now, there's a secondary gain to staying in an uncomfortable place, can be massively triggering to people. So that, I'm not trying to trigger you. But again, a trigger is a reflection of an unhealed wound. I'm just going to throw that out there. So if you get, irritated by something that said, it's always important to kind of reflect why, like, is there truth in that statement, or do you completely reject that? And that's okay. I don't know your situation. But just even from personal experience, right? Like, when you are in a place where, let me walk you through kind of some of the stuff that we've been through just in a real short snippet. There were phases where, because we were so early on, right? Like, I had to take quote unquote control of a lot of things, right? And there's, again, I want to use quotes for this because it's the way I'm using the terminology, but power, quote unquote, that is given to me. A power over situation, the dynamic of the relationship completely changed. And I'm the person that's holding you accountable. And right. And so there's that, right? Now there's a level to which that makes me feel as if I have some control. And when somebody is massively traumatized, their brain is actively, vigilantly seeking safety and control.
Right.
And so when you feel like you've gotten to a place where maybe you can hold on to that control or create some sort of safety, whether or not it's real or perceived or even fake, because ultimately I couldn't control you in any way, right? You were participating in the process. And it ended up being a very, as much as I think it could be a healthy situation.
There's a mutuality.
Yeah, a mutuality to it. But in an unhealthy way, there could be this point at which I could have said, no, I'm gonna hold on to this control just for the sake of control, right? That's a secondary gain. That's where I'm not doing this because it's healthy. I'm doing it because in some way it makes me feel safe. But what's hard to face is when that's not actually true. It's a false sense of safety.
And we have discussions about some of those things.
Right. And that's what I'm trying to share is the progression, right? Because when you actually want to move into health and into recovery, it is hard. I totally get why people will stay stuck and choose a secondary gain, because there is and I'm going to say false, but there is a sense of safety there. But there is a sense of security. Well, I know what to anticipate here. I feel as if I can maintain control in this situation. You can't, but you feel as if you can, right? And so the super, super, super scary thing is to begin as you move into recovery, if you're moving towards reconciliation, or even if you're moving towards separation and gaining more of your autonomy and independence, you begin to piece by piece release that control one step at a time. And then you're moving through it and letting go of these things. And so the secondary gain then has to go away. And that is painful. It is very hard. That is very hard. But the victim status too is something that I can, and I guess in a way, and we've had a lot of conversations about this, I think in various ways. When I'm looking at the victim status, I can personally say that can be very hard to let go of, because just in our particular situation, people love you, absolutely love you. Your friends love you, my friends love you, my family loves you, all this kind of stuff, right? And so there were very few people that were anti-Patrick when this came out. And there weren't a whole lot of people that were super supportive of me necessarily in the way that I felt totally seen, right? In my pain. And so it can be very easy to want to, and this is hard, man, because there are certain people that I haven't felt very supported by. And I catch myself, because if I don't feel seen, if I don't feel like you have seen my pain that I've gone through, the depths to which this has been a struggle for me, I'm going to have to catch myself in conversation, not having to try to convince you. Because the automatic defense mechanism is going to be me wanting to remind you of all the pain that I've gone through because I'm not feeling seen. So again, that's an internal thing. It's not their responsibility to understand that I have complex PTSD. It's not, right? It's just not. And that's not where you and I are in our relationship anymore, is where you're actively hurting me, right? And so that can be a really difficult thing, because with people, it's really interesting, because with friends of mine that were completely validating and basically how do you want me to feel towards Patrick? Do we do we like him or not? Do we like him or not like him today? Right. Because they were willing to go with me through the process where they were like, I'm team Kylene. I see your pain. I cannot imagine what you're going through. I validate that. Those are the people that I feel totally safe being like, Patrick's doing great. Patrick's doing awesome. We're doing really well together. We've progressed. This is what I'm struggling with. But it's really fascinating, because when people see me and understand my pain, I'm willing to tell them all the good things. When I feel like people have never validated the pain that I've gone through, it's like I almost feel obligated to remind them. Right. And it's like I don't want to praise you too much in front of them because it hurts my feelings that they were always pro you, right? All that kind of stuff. And so that's an example, I think, of recognizing that, first of all, because I recognize that, right? I understand that I catch myself in those times, and it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be doing that, and it's really coming back to moving into actual health knowing who your community is, because that community is going to provide safety, right? I know who my people are, that I can tell the good and the bad and the ugly, and they're going to be happy for me. They're going to verbally affirm me and make me feel safe. They're going to be angry when I'm angry. They're going to be sad when I'm sad. They're just going to hold space for wherever I'm at, right? And I know who those people are because they've demonstrated that, right?
Yeah, right.
And so reminding, like, that's the community, right? And everybody else is just, I need to be okay understanding that they don't understand.
Right. Yeah.
And if that is still a wound for me, maybe processing that separately.
Yeah. Yeah. And you just, I thought of something. It's like requiring everybody in your life to the person to show up exactly the way you want to be is too hard of a thing to manage. You know, and the whole point of seeking out community is to find those people who do that, not to force everyone to do it.
Right.
Yeah, that's too hard. You talk about control.
It's really hard when people don't demonstrate empathy when you're going through something like PTSD, you know, and it's like, well, how can you not, you know, it's very painful. So I get that. And that's where the secondary gain comes in, right? Yep. Well, if I make victimhood my identity, then I'm going to feel justified in you know, for lack of a better term, forcing it down this person's throat of like, you need to understand my pain, right? But if I recognize, no, the healing actually that's a wound in me. Right, where I'm not feeling seen, right? And that's okay. I need to accept that. And I need to go lean on the community that is safe for me.
You know, Dr. Glenn Patrick Doyle, you sent me this, says, I believe the point of trauma recovery is to get so good, so practiced at using the skills and tools and philosophies that we can finally start thinking about things other than trauma or recovery every day. No one wants either trauma or recovery to be their identity. I don't. And so you think about skills, tools, philosophies, right? Skills, tools, philosophies. Skills are, you know, interacting with a groups, healthy community is a tool, right? And it's, you know, there's a lot of individual things you do. There's a lot of group things you do. And I think where you're coming from is you were talking about the philosophy side of it. You know, what's your philosophy surrounding that? What are you expecting from people? What, you know, what is it? If you can remain in a victim mentality, if you're like, well, more people need to support my side of things. Well, good luck looking, because you may be disappointed and people may not come alongside you the way you want.
Percent through this journey, you will be disappointed.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. People are going to have.
People will hurt your feelings. Right. People will not understand that infidelity is a trauma.
Right.
People will not understand that you have PTSD. Now, just to clarify, not every person that goes through this does, but about 70-80% of women that go through betrayal end up with PTSD symptoms. And then if you have trauma that was prior to this, or trauma in childhood, or continued lack of safety, then you end up having complex PTSD, which is something that you and we didn't talk a lot about this in this podcast, but maybe we will in another. We kind of come to understand that that's what I'm experiencing. And so there's a lot of pain there, right? And not everybody's going to understand that.
Yeah.
And getting to the place where it's like, okay, that's okay. But developing the community where you do feel seen, do feel validated, do feel supported, that is going to be important, right? And knowing who those people are. Which is a great segue to talking about the recovery use of work community.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but no, I love that, that quote that, I saw and then sent you, that you just said that, because it's so good, because I read that in the last, video the class that I taught in the Recovery U community, because it's like, that's my goal. That is my goal in this community, is to give you the tools and the resources, because the idea is that we practice them so much that we teach our body how to feel safe, that we learn boundaries, that we learn how to communicate, that we learn how to navigate our painful triggers, that we learn how to support ourselves and reach out into a safe community that is growth minded, a safe community that is going to empathize with the pain you're going through and going to remind you that there is a moving through, that there is healing on the other side, that there is a happy, healthy life on the other side, right? And that's what I'm trying to create in the brand new Recovery Youth Support community. So if you are a betrayed partner, this is an online community that is off of Facebook. It's very private. It's a members only community. And I go live teaching classes that are related to topics around betrayal, around recovery, around addiction, processing your emotions, things like that, twice a month. So I'm offering 2 classes twice a month. And if you join live, you can stay on and ask questions. And I save the replay. I repost it in the group. So people that are in a different time zone or a different country or whatever can rewatch that. We have a resource library that has other videos that I've done, and that will continue to build up. And we're going to find ways to safely create a community in here where you can connect peer to peer. We're kind of working on developing that right now because we really want it to be a place where it is safe, and it is growth minded, and but that you have a place to connect with people that are going through it as well. And so one of the things that is really cool is this is brand new. And so, this last quarter of the year, the first quarter that this is being developed, everyone that joins is going to be, a founding member essentially of this group. And so founding members really have what I think is a beautiful opportunity to help create the culture, help create the group in the way that is safe, that is what you want it to look like. So I even received feedback after my first class, and it made me kind of rethink some things and want to add a couple different ways to connect in a safe, less triggering way and everything. And so, for example, if somebody is in, a deep phase of reconciliation in their relationship, depending on where they are, it may be difficult for them to hear stories of discovery, right? Because they're really trying to move past that, stay grounded and safe and focus on their own relationship, right? And so having everyone in the same share in the same page may not be healthy for everyone. And someone else that's focusing on reconciliation may feel super comfortable seeing those stories and actually working as an encourager for those people, right? And so they might be on that page and say, hey, I felt like that too 2 years ago, and this is where I'm at right now, right? And so respecting where everybody is in terms of their triggers and recovery. And so I think we're going to create some pages where, depending on what stage of healing you are, you can connect with each other and share with each other openly and encourage each other, and all of that. So that's going to be really cool. That's coming down. It's not quite set up exactly yet, but we have the classes, we have the resource library, all of that is set up. And it's really, it's this idea that we're talking about here today. I guess you could kind of sum it up in that I don't know what the word is. It's not a cliche. It's the what is the word? Adage? Is that the word I'm looking for? It's the adage.
Not sure.
It's the statement that basically you are the sum of the people you spend the most time around. Is that right?
It's an adage.
An adage. Okay. And it's really true, right? And so I've always said, sometimes when you are creating your community, those 5 people that you spend the most time around, sometimes those are like people that run podcasts, or an author of a book that you're reading, or it's and so sometimes if it's not people that you're immediately surrounded with at work, for example, or whatever, you can create that yourself. And so the Recover You support community is available, and my hope and my desire and my vision for this community is that it is a place of safety, that it is a place of encouragement, that it gives you tools and resources to continue growing. And so if you're interested in that, the link to join that community is in the show notes, and you can get the first month free with the code PODVIP, PODVIP. And so that way, there's no risk, right? Just join us for a month, check out the resources. If you find value in it, continue your membership, and it's $25 a month for those 2 classes and for that community. And then and if you join it and you don't want anything to do with it, you can always cancel anytime. But we hope that you'll stay and become a founding member and help us to create this really encouraging community. And I'm totally open to feedback too. Like I said, someone already offered me some, and I'm working on kind of creating something a little bit more specific because of that. And so I look forward to that, right? Like I'm sure I'm not able to anticipate everything. And so I want to hear from you, and I want to see, like, what is your experience in the group, and what is it that you would find particularly helpful? Like, I have an idea of at some point when we get to a specific number or a big enough group, having little offshoots where we do book clubs, right? Like we're all going through a specific book that's focused on, parts or, internal family systems, or, different cool stuff that has to do with recovery, and we can all do it together. And so anyway, I think it'll be really cool. I'm really excited about it. We've already had a couple classes in there. So if you come in, you can watch those in the class replay section. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on social media. But we would absolutely love to have you. If you are a betrayed partner, you are welcome in the Recover You support community. Don't forget to use the code PODVIP in the show notes for your first month free. And I hope to see you there. Anything else around community, Patrick? No, you think that's good?
I think it's good.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, if you have any questions or other podcast topics too, we would love to hear from you. So just reach out to me on social media, on Facebook or Instagram at Kylene Terhune. And we're always interested. We want to make sure that these podcasts resonate with you. We're so thankful for every single listener that we have every single month. So thank you for being here, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much for listening. If you found this podcast interesting or helpful, it would mean so much if you leave a 5-star review or post a screenshot and share on social media. We are on a mission to share the message of recovery, and you can help get the word out. If you know a friend who could use this podcast, please share it.